I'm Ashley Wells. I'm representing Congressman Hern's office. I'm interviewing Frank Lowry on Friday, June 14th at the Cityplex Towers in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Also present is Johnny Moyer, who is operating the camera. This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project. Where and when were you born?
I was born 98 years ago in Oklahoma. I was adopted at the age of 4 months by a lovely couple in Henrietta, Oklahoma. And basically, that's been my Henrietta and Tulsa. Other than service locations, that's where my life has been.
What are your parents' names?
Dad was Elgin, E-L-G-A-N, Lowry, and mother's name was Beulah.
What were their occupations?
My dad was in the dry cleaning business in Henrietta beginning in 1914 and continued until he retired.
Do you have siblings, and if so, what are their names?
I have one son whose name was Will Frank Lowry II, then Jennifer, and then Vicky Joe. Two daughters and one son.
Those are your children, okay.
My son is deceased.
What primary and secondary schools or college did you attend?
My college was Oklahoma Baptist University beginning in 1939.
And where did you go to primary school?
Oh, in Henrietta. I graduated from Henrietta, Oklahoma High School in 1939, and then attended OBU later that year, and intended to remain there for 2 years, do pre-engineering, aeronautical engineering. My mother had always said I was going to be a preacher. She said, "You're going to go to OBU." And the more she said OBU, the more I disliked the idea, but that's where I ended up because of flying. That's where it all started.
Did you learn how to fly at OBU?
I learned to fly at OBU and was a flight instructor on December 8, 1942.
Did you hold any jobs before entering the service?
I'm sorry, sir.
Did you hold any jobs before entering the service?
Oh, my first job started at age 12.
What was that?
I worked at a bicycle shop in Henrietta. Then I worked at a funeral home in high school. I worked at the zinc smelters in high school years. So that was the income until I finally became a flight instructor and really earned my good money.
Did your mom or dad serve in the military?
No, they were no reason or cause during their lifetime.
Can you tell us about when you went into the military? Were you drafted or enlisted?
Well, first activity that I had with the military started early in 42. Being a flight instructor, the Army had decided that the gliders were the way to fight a war. And I was a pre-glider flight instructor at Okmulgee for several months. Then they had all that they wanted, and I went to Texas to become a flight instructor at a Army Air Corps primary flight school. And because of being an instructor, they said, "You don't get to shoot guns and drop bombs, you get to train people that do." So till finally I was taken into the Air Corps Reserve to keep me out of the draft system. Draft boards were robbing the training command of flight instructors, which was a really bad deal. And they said, you have an option. You can join now and go into the reserve, but we'll also tell you what you might be someday whenever you're put on active duty. And in my case, a minimum of a first lieutenant, probably a captain, which finally ended up being a flight officer service pilot in 1944 and remained there at the command of General Hap Arnold because he was mad at the military.
How old were you when you went into the service?
My first duty would be, excuse me, would be 20, that first activity.
And what were your parents' thoughts about you going into the service?
Oh, my mother just went into orbit. She was afraid of flying and didn't like the idea, and she disliked it more as time went along. But my lovely wife said my greatest military achievement was coming home alive.
Were you married before you went into the service?
No, I was married on June 26, 1943. Correction, 42.
What or who did you leave behind when you left to serve? What family members or friends?
I had a sister and my parents and Henrietta, about 5 different families of my mother's, brothers and sisters, and a whole lot of cousins at that time. But I was just like everybody else, lined up to fight this war. We were mad. Everybody was mad, especially young.
Did you have any friends from Henrietta that you served with? Or who also served?
None from Henrietta. Didn't serve with anybody from OBU. I lost a friend on the football team that I was at OBU. He was killed in Pearl Harbor. My roommate died in the Navy as a Navy pilot flying a PBY in Alaska. Those are the only ones that I recall.
What happened when you departed for training camp and in your early days of training? What do you recall from training?
Well, I really wasn't called. Are you talking about end of the military?
The beginning of the military, when you were having your training on what your tasks were going to be.
Well, I was being a flight instructor. I was just employed as really a flight commander in the pre-glider school, and then was a flight instructor, a assistant director, and a Air Corps primary flight school. And later on during Korea period of time, I was a flight instructor at Ryder Air Base near Tucson, which was a great service that I did. I enjoyed it, and was not really happy when it all ended. But I knew it was going to stop someday.
What's your most vivid memory from flight instructor school that kind of helped prepare you before your service?
I don't quite understand the question.
What do you remember from your time in flight instructor when you were learning to be a to fly planes?
Oh my. We had so many different students all those many years. And in fact, I still remain in contact with one of them by email today. His name is Colonel Gurney, Harlan Gurney, who was a graduate of West Point in 1955 with General Bell was his classmate, and they both were pilots, of course. And being able to stay in contact with him has been fun and games, and keeps me up to speed according to information that I've never seen.
How did you adapt to military life?
Just like everybody else, it was a mission and a job, and I guess wives and parents did most of the worry. We never thought about not coming back home. That was the attitude of most military in those days. We never had a discussion about death.
What are your memories on how you adapted to the living situation and the food?
Well, one year, my wife and I had to move 7 different times in a training base because that's the way it happened. There wasn't any place to live. We were not on base, and the town didn't have that much ability, so we shared a house and went along with the rationing that took place and did the best we could. And nobody complained because they had to work at doing the best they could, and that took a lot of the wives' time and mothers a lot of time to be able to prepare what they had to eat. It was not like today's plentiful.
What was the hardest part of the military lifestyle for you to adapt to?
You know, I never had given that any thought. That's the toughest part. It was a job that I did along with thousands and thousands of others, and we had a goal and a purpose and a reason. So those were the paramount activities, mentally and physically.
What was the easiest part?
Having fun.
Elaborate on that for me. What fun memories do you
Well, I guess
have?
the fun part was being able to teach guys to fly. I only eliminated 4 or 5 different student pilots in those years, not because they couldn't fly. They could all fly, I saw to that, but they didn't think right. They just weren't able to plan in a split second. But so therefore they had to go do something else. But the most fun was completion and knowing and what these 2 or 3 of these guys stayed in touch with me and their accomplishments in the military, like General Bell was a fighter in Vietnam, fighter pilot, recognized. Colonel Bell was recognized by a special activity, Colonel Gurney, because of what he's able to do in a special mission for the Air Force and picking up these things that were dropped from space and captured them before they went in the ocean. And he was the expert, and he accomplished it. I was very proud of that, still am.
So tell us, since you were a flight instructor, tell us, surely there were maybe scary? Were you ever nervous with any of your students in the plane, or did you ever play pranks on them, or kind of trick them at all, or?
No, really, because pilots have an unusual attitude of life and ability, and we are constantly, every split second, aware of our surroundings and what might happen and make the correction. I never had an accident. I never had a student that had an accident. I did have one scary moment one time when I was attempting to do an acrobatic maneuver in a North American T6 trainer to do a loop at 120 miles an hour that required the application of flaps. Well, it didn't work out real good. And I was excited and wondered if I was going to have to bail out or not. But it ended successfully in a few seconds, and so it was a short-lived thrill.
What type of planes did you fly?
The beginning days were very small airplanes. The primary airplane was a Fairchild PT-19 trainer, and then the T6 trainer, the T-28, which was a World Korean type trainer, which was a Pussycat. Everybody could fly a T-28. I only was a passenger a couple of times in a jet at the guest of one of my students that arrived at base to give me a flight in a T-bird, an F-80, and that was a real thrill. I did get to fly it at the invitation of Willie Air Force Base in Arizona, and got to fly an hour, and that airplane in total control except the landing and takeoff. Lots of fun. I could not believe it.
What was the scariest part of flying?
That part would be flying the hump from India into China. We were supporting the 20th Bomb Group, mainly flying barrels of gasoline for the B-29s when they finally arrived in China to be able to bomb Japan. The weather across the Himalaya mountains was totally unknown until we began activities there. Some of the worst thunderstorm areas in the world. And we did not know that the winds could blow 100, 140, or 50 miles an hour at all in the altitudes that we were flying there. And the thunderstorms were beginning to end some days. My duties were started during the night, and that's the way it stayed. Every night I flew the hump. And except my last mission was daytime, and I finally saw the ground. Oh, I had an exciting thing happen. Had a Jap Betty fly me formation with me on a return trip at 20,000 feet. And he flying tight formation, refused, his lights were off, ours were on. And he's playing games from side to side. And finally we looked back and he wasn't there, and that's when I hit the deck and flew the mountains. So, funny story, but that was exciting for maybe an hour.
Was there anything special you did for good luck before getting behind and flying?
No. I had no toys or things that I carried for good luck. Just me and my guys.
Where did you serve?
I was in Corsicana, Texas, and Army Primary. I got my instrument rating and training at Randolph Field. And then I went to Dallas and Romulus, Michigan, in the Air Transport Command for the stateside. And then from there, I went to India and flew my C-46 cargo all the way. That included South America and the rock, which is out in the middle of the Atlantic, and then through Africa and on to India. So, the exciting part with that trip was we got to spend the night in Agra, India, where the Taj Mahal is. So we got to see the Taj Mahal, as well as visit the Red Fort, which was very entertaining and very interesting and very educational. I still enjoy seeing pictures of the Taj Mahal because I was there.
Anything else that you recall that you noticed or learned while either being in Africa or India?
Yes, I learned a lesson. The only time in my life that I was really, I can't use the words, being a show-off, I'll say. Because the flight instructor who was supposed to be training me was chewing on the previous student. He just cussed at him and fussed at him and all this, and he had never flown an airplane before. So he did not deserve that. And he said, okay, wise guy, get up here and see if you can do any better than the last one. Well, he didn't know I had more flying time in that airplane than he did. So we took off and climbed altitude. And the first maneuver, he said, let me see steep turns, 360-degree steep turns. So I did, but not only did I do a 360, I went 3 more and then bump, bump. That means that was 2 perfect circles. And I looked over and pointed at him, looked him straight in the eye, and said, now it's your turn. He said, take me back to base. That was the exciting part of that trip. But I never did that again. I don't do it, I haven't done it since either.
Did you keep a personal diary during your time of service?
I did not, except a daily love letter to my wife, which we got home and she wrote me every day and I wrote her every day, and we had a big box saved one, and we kept them in a hidden place in the house for years, and finally we decided we have never looked at them. I don't think we want anybody else to ever look at them. So one night in the fireplace, we burned hundreds and hundreds of love letters.
So
and it's because of my memories of her that I've been able to survive the past 8 years without her. And she was a fantastic wife, fantastic mother, a great human being, and pure American.
So you were married when you were in the service?
I was married in 42. So that was right after things got started.
And you wrote to her every day?
Every day we were apart, every day.
Did you write to anyone else back home, your parents or siblings?
I know because the siblings were just babies. They were 1 and 2 years old at that time. I depended on Geneva to give Mother and Dad what they like to know. It didn't have that much time to vote to everybody else but her.
Were you able to send anything home to your family or friends?
Only when I came home from India,
What did you bring back?
I brought back a 2-pound box of tea. Going through the PX, I thought, well, see if I can do this, and so I just bought probably 40 or 50 cents for tea, and take it home, and we kept it for about a year or two, and decided, well, we might as well try it. The most gorgeous, wonderful tea. Of course, that was the tea country. Upper India, the tea patches were huge, like cotton fields in Alabama. And I lived in the middle of a tea patch, and the Suckerting was the name of my base, and which was only about 30 miles south of Tibet. I was there in Tibet one day for a few hours. I was in China many times, but only for a few hours at a time. Never spent the night in China, fortunately. It was not fun. No fun. And food was terrible. My good buddy and I worked together for several years, and one of the bases out of the way bases, I landed one day, and the guy parked at me. I looked down, I said, "Max, is that you?" He said, "Yeah, this is my base." So I got out, and Max had lost a lot of weight. In fact, he had on a GI belt, and he wore the same belt there as at Randolph Field, and it reached the middle of his back. He said, "We're starving." So every time I could, I had a B-4 parachute bag full of food that I could buy out of the PX. And I'd yell and say, "Where's Max?" They said, "Well, he's out flying." I said, "You know what I got?" They said, "Yeah, where is it? How much we owe you?" And so the money was given back to me, and I repeated several times.
What were the meals like during your service? How do you remember the food?
We lucked out at Suckerting. We had a chef that was a mess sergeant. And he did things with that food that was available that very few bases enjoyed. So our food at Suckerting was edible. And
what was your favorite meal? What was your favorite meal?
Oh, at home, you mean?
While you were at Suckerting.
Oh, I don't know. I've been asleep since then.
What do you recall the living conditions being like?
Well, I lived in a British tent, which was lucky because that's the cool type tent. And there was 4 of us in bunks in each tent, and surrounded by mosquito netting, and our beds were surrounded by mosquito netting, because when the sun went down, we saw jillions of mosquitoes come out of the ground, out of the grass. And that's the reason they kept the grass cut down to about 2 inches for snakes and mosquitoes. They did the best they could that way.
Were you up to date on what was going on back home? How did you get news when you were overseas?
We had very little news that was published by the Army, and occasionally, maybe weekly, that paper would arrive, but it wasn't very much, and we got the best enjoyment out of the victories that we read about and the good things that were happening. And the war, that's what we were interested in, is how was going happening and how good were things going. And we did not have any news about the Pacific, hardly at all. I happened to be in Calcutta when VJ Day arrived, and it took about 2 days to sober up. The whole city got drunk.
What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
I really didn't have any recreation. There wasn't anything for us to do. But our activities were pretty busy, and so when we got after a flight, mostly was to get as much sleep as you could, and get some food, because prepare for the next flight, which was going to happen later that day, and it did.
What unit did you serve with the Army Air Corps? Who were you attached to?
That in India was the 1337th Air Transport Command, as well as Air Transport Service, which was a division of the 20th Bomb Group that did the same thing as we did. And I was very disappointed when our ATS service that I was a part of did not get to go to the Pacific, so I was transferred back to ATC and remained in India.
What were your main duties so you were the flight instructor? Did you have any other roles that you did in service?
Oh, I was a flight commander part of that time, as well as just a flight instructor, but instructing was really a pleasure and a joy and mission in my life. And finally was recognized by the Air Force as top 10% of the training command. So that was quite an honor to be acknowledged on that basis. We did receive the first presidential unit citation for flying the Hump. That's just, if I got a medal, I guess that's the only one. But it was, Jennifer read to me today out of her telephone that it was the first presidential unit citation given to any service organization.
What kind of friendships did you form while serving? Tell us about some of your friends.
Well, one of them, his name was Archibald. He was a Canadian. He wore Canadian wings as well as United States wings. We stayed in touch for a few years. Anybody else remaining that I recall stayed in touch with? No, I do not remember. I'm sure there was a couple, but I don't recall at this moment.
Do you recall the day that your service ended, and where were you?
I absolutely remember that day. So that was at Fort Smith, Arkansas at Camp Chaffee. And we were seated in line in a rotation to go to receive our discharge papers. And I was sitting next to another flight officer, but he was a military flight officer. In other words, he had been trained for military duty fighters or bombers. And so I'm sitting there listening. I could hear the sergeant talk to him. And he said, well, of course, the flight officer's name was Warrant, and they were dressed as Mr. So he said, Mr. Smith, he said, the rules are that you have been in grade in time, so you will walk away from this table as a second lieutenant. You get an automatic upgrade by one level, regardless of rank. a major would go to LC. So it came my time to that part of the issue, and he said, Mr. Lowry, he said, I'm gonna have you read the order rather than take my word for it. And he turned it around, and it's only about 3 lines, and it was under the direction of General Hap Arnold about all officers in grade and time shall be upgraded 1 level, including flight officer Army pilots, excluding flight officer service pilots. So therefore, I remained a flight officer out of discharge and was denied that one benefit given to all other officers.
Go ahead.
And it took years later, and my friendship with some high-level people that gave me the information why. He was mad because the WASP were not taken into the military like the Army WACs. And so therefore he punished the rest of us.
How were you received by your family and community when you came back home?
With love and joy.
What was the best part of your service experience?
Success. I guess that enjoyment of pilots just love to fly, regardless of what we're doing. And those guys that lost their lives being shot down, that's war, and it's bad. But other than that, I enjoyed it.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
By going to work.
Where did you go to work?
Oh, golly. My dad had always wanted to have a little men's haberdashery, which was a miniature men's clothing store. I had direct communications with the vice president for American Airlines. He said, all you gotta do is get to my office and we're gonna employ you instantly as a captain on American Airlines. Well, unfortunately, he got killed in an accident in North Africa before coming back home. So consequently, I took the second way out and going into Dad and helping him start and build a men's clothing store. That was successful for about 3 years, and then for the one and only time in our lives, my dad denied me something that was very crucial to me, and at my expense, not his. And I told my wife, I've just read a magazine. I know the contractor at Morata Air Base, Tucson, Hal Dar, civilian, and let's go to Tucson and see. And we loved it, and so I went to work for Morata Air at Dar Aerotech, Morata Air Base, Tucson. And
how long were you there?
9 years.
9 years.
8 years.
Did you join any veterans organizations when you came back home to kind of connect with your fellow veterans?
Not a great deal, a time or two for a short period of time. But how many times can you hear war stories? I didn't have any really to tell, so, and I listened, but finally enough's enough.
How did your military experience affect your life?
Good, I hope. It did not do any harm. I enjoyed the work that we were doing. So just coming back alive, as Geneva said, that's a success.
What are some life lessons you learned from your military service?
Discipline and setting goals and accomplishing the mission.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, I became a student of war beginning the American Revolutionary War. Not a great student, but enough that I understand the necessity, and I'm very proud of the United States of entering and doing what we have done as a nation in World War I, World War II, saving the world from dictators. And being politically involved, I certainly am not happy with the culture of today's young group. That is not their fault, they didn't start it. My opinion, the parents started it at how in their home. They allowed it to continue in the public school system, and they continue to do that. How the culture in today's world is going to change, I have no idea. But we are in serious political trouble because people do not consider the one thing I have and hold very dear, as the issue is not who's right, it is what's right. And in today's political world, that is not to our advantage always. It's a very tight schedule that is lived by, and it's tough on we conservatives. And I better leave any other names out.
Did you bring some photographs with you that
Oh,
you
yeah,
wanted
yeah, I
to
got-
share?
Where are they? I got 2 photographs here.
Can you show the camera and explain who's in the photo?
I'll have to, can you see that all right?
Yes.
That picture is made at Corsicana, Texas, in the Army Air Corps Primary Flight School. I accidentally be walking by. General Tunner is to my right, and that's me looking straight into the camera. He was just on an inspection. Well, the next time I saw him or heard from him, he was also my commanding general in India. I didn't really like General Tunner. He and I did not agree.
What did you like about him?
The way that he conducted his priorities, he and I didn't see eye to eye on what's right, who's right. Well, this one,
Where are you in this
that's
photo?
in Karachi, India. And my flight with cargo on my airplane was to Karachi, from Florida to Karachi, India. And this was the first morning that we were there, and that guy sitting in the middle of this picture was a GI that had orders to go home in 30 days. He had been in India for over 2 years. He wanted his picture made with somebody live from the States. And that was my co-pilot over here on my, the left side as you see it for that trip. It was an exciting trip.
You had mentioned, that our current generation and everything. What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
Well, I could preach for a week about that, I guess, but try to condense it. Is that love needs to be attended to carefully, openly, properly, and with honesty and sincerity. And stop the arguments between political groups, decide what it should be, and vote how it should be, and for those people that believe that the good way is the good way. The United States started out the good way, and until someday, maybe in the 1950s, culture began to change. And we have elements within our population that really have some strange, unrealistic attitudes about work schedules, honesty, sincerity, and respect of life. That's as quick as I can make it, I guess, other than that week I talked about.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed that you'd like to be added to this interview about your military service?
Nothing that would be out of the ordinary, really, that I can think of